Welcome everybody, this is Nick with O3 Drop. So, the ARG States is coming up this weekend, and I'm actually traveling with a few friends down to Miami to play in PPGs. Now, I've literally been thinking about what deck I want to play ever since Set 4 was even, revealed and announced. Like, this is something we've been planning on doing for a while. And to be honest, at this point in the meta, I'm really torn. Like, there's quite a few decks that could be really good. And so I wanted to make this video to talk about the 5 decks that I'm really considering playing this coming weekend. Kind of give you guys my thoughts on each one, some pros, minuses, stuff like that. And that way, if you have a tournament of your own, maybe you can use this video to help you make a decision. Now, keep in mind, at this point, I haven't done as much testing as I would have liked, just because I've been working a lot, and my work hours are kind of weird, so I don't really get to test anywhere near as much as I used to, and that makes me really sad. But I am going to be testing a good amount before the event this weekend, so I should be okay with that. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that most of these decks, this is more or less a first draft, so, things definitely need changing in some of them, and I know what needs to be changed, and I'll try my best to talk about that, so maybe you can find your own changes. So let's go ahead and start talking about them. Now, I'm going to go ahead and be honest with you straight up. There are 5 decks here. 4 of them, I'm pretty sure, are the SS3 leader. So, if that's not something that you want to see, then I apologize. You can go ahead and exit out now. Alright, so this first deck, this is basically an updated version of my Chain Attack Zeno deck that I played for most of Set 3. Now, obviously, you may notice, hey, there's no Chain Attack Zeno. Well, the reason that I took it out is because with how fast the meta is at this point, a lot of times you don't really need it because you just end up beating your opponent. With the deck at this point, a lot of times your opponent's deck is mainly set up to try to win on turns 1 through 3. So when you start reaching that 4th turn and higher with the forcing hit, you really just start to take over the game and basically just win just off of that alone. Yeah, really, forcing hit and Fu, along with some Topo and Champa, are basically your ways to win. Now, if I was going to play this deck, I would be sideboarding probably 4 Trunks and 3 Zeno. Just in case, because you will more than likely still need that against the Apes, if you do play an SS3 Apes deck. Now, having said that, you still can actually do pretty well against the Ape deck. I feel like at this point in the meta, it's really hard for them to get out their 5-drop. And so, with that, I mean, they don't have barriers, so you can side in some removal. The 5-drop food from the new set comes to mind. And then this is so fast, like, they don't always have a chance to get set up like they would want to. So you definitely have a really good shot against Apes with this deck. As a matter of fact, I played Apes last weekend and lost to a deck very similar to this one because of that. So my pros for this deck are, it can get off to a fast start, it's not very hard to self-awaken, and it's just an overall balanced deck, I think. It has a really good early game and a really good mid game, and late game doesn't exist anymore. So I think for the current meta, this is a really good deck, and this is one that I'm definitely heavily considering. Now, the cons for me are, there's not a super good solid finisher. Hit is obviously really good, and it can definitely finish games for you, but like there's not an actual finisher like you're gonna see in at least a couple of these other decks. My other thing is, if your opponent's playing really defensively, then there's a chance this deck could just deck out just because of the card draw. Between Awakening early, using the Bulmas, using the Gokus, using the Flute and the Pickle, like, you could literally just deck out if your opponent turtles. Now, I honestly like the way the deck is set up right now. I think it's got just the right amount of 10Ks and just the right amount of free combos. Um, so yeah, some sideboard options for this would definitely be 5-drop Mass Sand that removes everything like Kale. 5-drop Fu from the new set. You could also even consider some of the Gotens, the ones that pop stuff. Because I know sometimes what people will do with the monkey deck is they'll play the Bardock and they'll leave it out so they can evolve it on the following turn, which I myself did that. And so if you side in the Gotens, you can swing, combo, pop it. And so that's always an option. It also helps to get rid of some of the other blockers, because the Goten can pop Yajirobe's, even the Android 16 blocker, stuff like that. So it would be a decent option if your opponent is trying to stack Yajirobe's and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and go to the next deck. So you probably noticed this is probably about 30 of the same cards. A lot of variation in this meta. I love it. So with this deck, basically you don't ever really want to awaken if you don't have to. That's the thing that I've learned about this deck. Whenever people first started talking about how good this deck was, I really didn't understand it. I really didn't know why until I played against it, and I still don't know if I think it's the best deck in format, but it is a very solid deck. So basically what you're going to be doing is you use the Hydreigon, and that's what I'm going to call him. I like Pokemon. Fuck off. You use his ability to basically net card advantage. Now, obviously, this is what they meant for it to do at first. That's why that's the whole reason he was made. That's the whole reason this 1-drop was made. That was their whole intention. I don't know if they ever saw it going down exactly the way it did or not, but that's normally, that's what they made it for. You attack your leader into theirs. You discard the 1-drop. You draw, I think, 2, is it? I don't know. You draw 1 or 2 off of it. And then because you discard this, you get to go search for this. And it's like you're just netting so much advantage in your hand off of this ability alone. I don't think you should ever even, if you awaken, it's during your final turn just to untap the energies, or you awaken on defense to untap the energies. You should never really awaken or have to awaken with this leader, though. So, as far as the deck itself goes, it's pretty standard. You have your Trunks, your Kaba, your untapped Trunks, Bean, Flute, it's pretty standard. So the one thing that I'll say this deck does really well is because it's able to get so much hand advantage, you're able to out-combo your opponents a lot of times, and that's how this deck really wins. Is because you just play stuff, you out-combo your opponent, they can't keep up. And then obviously with Bodyguard Legic, you're able to just throw down some free blockers, swing with him, flute him back up, throw him back down, swing again, then start playing other stuff. And so yeah, this deck basically just braces your opponent, and if they're not set up defensively, they could be in a lot of trouble. I think my biggest problem with this is that Nimbus just screws this deck over really hard. Because if your opponent uses Nimbus, that's basically an entire free turn. So sideboard options for this would be pretty much the same as every other deck. Yeah, literally probably the same as this deck. So 5-drop Mass Sand, 5-drop Fu. Yeah, I'm not really sure there's too much else off the top of my head that I can think of. I'm sure, the more you play with it, you might find some stuff that you might want to side in, but yeah, overall, it seems pretty straightforward. Also, Chain Attack Zeno, just like the other deck. Alright, so let's go ahead and go on to the next one. So, this is the blue control deck, or at least my variant on the blue control deck so far. Honestly, I have no idea how this deck did very well at the PPG event. Congratulations to that guy, he must have done something right to win, but I still don't quite understand. This deck to me seems like the most fun. If I get the chance to play this deck, if I test this deck and it tests well, this is probably the deck that I'm going to play. Just because I like how much fun it seems like, and you have so many different options, right? with these two decks right here, you don't really have a whole lot of options, right? Like, you get out your Trunks, you get out your Kaba, you swing, and I mean, that's pretty much it. Champa when necessary, use Trunks when necessary, whatever. With this deck, you have so many options. So, like, okay, do I need some blockers? Like, throw out Yajirobe or Piccolo. You know, does the blocker need to have barrier? Alright, Piccolo. Does it need to have barrier? No. Okay, then Yajirobe. Do I need to kill monkeys? Okay, Yajirobe. And then even with, like, the later drops, like, you know, can I swing for game if I get triple strike? Okay, Vegeta. You know, can I pop something with Piccolo and crit him? Okay, sick, let's do that. Do I need some better defense? Here's Bergamo. You know, Beerus just to be annoying. And then my own spice that I added to this. So the 6-drop Goku here is something that has been in the deck. And I started thinking, like, okay, so what would be a decent way to use this to finish? Well, right here. This would be a one-of that I would play. And hopefully whoever I played against does not watch my YouTube videos. And this would be my goal. Like, my goal would be to, if I get them down to 3 life and they won't let me push for game, just evolve the 6-drop into the 7-drop and swing away. Obviously, if they have a negate, that doesn't work. But, again, with this leader and how defensive he is, you should have something to, you know, save yourself with afterwards. Obviously, this deck has some pretty good, board clear. Now, one thing I will say is, as of right now, it does have way too many one-cost combos. And so that's something that I have to stop and think about what I want to get rid of, because I really don't like having this many one-cost combos. If anything, I might see about possibly getting rid of maybe some of the Gohans. I really like having the extra body on board, and so I'd really want to keep it, but at the same time, maybe a Beerus, a Gohan, and this Goku. Maybe even one of the Vegetas. I don't know. And then add some untapped Trunks in there as well. I just, as of right now, I do feel like it has weight, because it's at, like, what? That's 4, 8, 10, 13, 17, 19, 20, 22. Yeah, so it's at like 20. No, that's not it. So it's at 20. So right now it's at 21 cost combos. And even for an SS3 deck that untaps 3 energy, that's still a lot. You really just don't want to have that many. So one other thing too that you could make as a change is you could put in the 5-drop Fu here instead of the 7-drop. I personally like the 7-drop in this deck just because you have enough board clear as it is. Now, one other change that you could make too is if you don't have these Beerus right here, or maybe you just don't like them for some reason, you can switch and use the 4-drop Beerus. I have the Piccolo in here, and the reason that I like the Piccolo in here a little bit better is just because it's not a 1-cost. It is a 5k free combo. It has barrier, so my opponent does have to attack into it. So with it having barrier, that's basically it having blocker. If my opponent wants to kill it, they have to swing into it, so it's just as if it had blocker. Plus it does pop something, so it's got the built-in removal as well, and it's got critical. Like, yeah, like, there's not a reason to not play this over the Beerus. The one thing I will say, obviously, is if the Beerus, or if your opponent gets something out that costs more than, you know, 5 or 6, you could be in a little bit of trouble with Piccolo instead of Beerus. But at the same time, I feel like with this deck, you have enough ways to remove things. And, like, if that's the case, after game 1, just side into something else, like side into the 5-drop Fu, or even side into some of the Beerus. I like the Bergamo in here. I may cut this down to 2. I'm going to have to test and see how it feels. To be honest, I'd only want to play one of these per game, because my other turns I want to play threats that are going to keep my opponent on their toes. So I'd only want to play one of these per game, and if my opponent starts to run board clear, this could become somewhat useless. But as long as I'm able to get it out and use it to defend a few attacks, I'm going to take that as a win. The Beerus, I think this was a really underrated card since it first came out. I think a lot of people just felt like making your opponent choose, you know, the lesser of 2 evils is not really a good game mechanic, or at least not a good one to use. But in my opinion, especially at this point in the game when no one seems to really be running very high cost cards, You know, you see decks like this right here and like this one where most of the stuff in here, except for Fu, is only 4 costs or lower. I mean, literally, Fu's the only... So, like, that means that if you played this Beerus, unless they happen to have a Fu in hand, they're discarding at least 2 to 3 cards. Whether it's from their energy, their field, or their hand, they're discarding at least 2 to 3 cards. Then on top of that, if they want to block the Beerus, because he's already at 25. The fact that he's at 25 is another thing that I love about this card, because that means that now they're also discarding at least 2 more to block the attack. So this could literally single-handedly take away 5 cards or more from your opponent in one swing. And so just having that kind of advantage is just ridiculous. Now this Goku is also really interesting to me. If his ability wasn't when he swings, I don't think this Goku would be anywhere near as good as it is. But he does have Barrier, I believe it is, and then he's got Double Strike. As a matter of fact, let's see if I can do this real quick and see. Yeah, so he does have Barrier and he does have Double Strike. And when he attacks, you choose up to 1 opponent's battle cards, ignoring Barrier, and return it to the owner's hand, then choose up to 2 of your energy and switch them to active mode. So, once you get this on the field, you swing with it, you untap 2. Then you have the option to play Yajirobe if you want to. Or, you can just leave those open, and then pass turn, now you have 5 untapped. And then next turn, you can play something like a Beerus, swing with this guy, and now you've got 3 energies untapped. Do you need to play a Piccolo? Cool. And so, like, I really like this dude. I think he's really good. The only reason that I'm not playing more than 2 is because he does cost 6. And again, with him having Barrier, that's basically the same thing as him having Blocker. Because if your opponent wants him dead, they're going to have to swing into him. And with 25k power, they're probably going to have to combo something. Now, him having Barrier is the main reason why I'm willing to play the Ultra Instinct Goku in the deck as well. Because this doesn't necessarily stand up whenever you EX Evolve it. Yeah, it just says play the card on top of the card, so it doesn't stand up. So the turn when you do evolve it, you can't have swung with this Goku yet. So the ideal scenario here would be to play this down, swing with it. Next turn, maybe play the Beerus down or something. Swing with the Beerus, see if you can get your opponent to negate that, and then play the 7-drop Goku and try to go for game. Obviously, this actually bounces everything back to your opponent's hand, but the thing is they can't combo with it. So, because whenever this card swings, your opponent can't combo. So, literally, either they have a negate handy, or they just take 3 damage. And with how fast some of these decks like to put themselves down at 3 in this meta, they could be in a lot of trouble with that. So, this is a deck that, again, I think could be a lot of fun. I do need to take out some of the 1 costs. Some of my sideboard options for this would definitely be the untapped Trunks if it's not already in the main board. Some of the 4-drop Beerus. And some of the other black cards, which also some of the Shun Shun. I think this would be a really good deck to run the black Shun Shun in, because a lot of people are obviously playing SS3 and all kinds of other blue leaders. I do feel like this is one deck that could get away with playing the Shun Shun if it wanted to. So that's also something else I'd consider. And then maybe find something just in case you do have to deal with a Cell package. Because if you do Self-Awaken and then have to do a Cell, you are going to screw yourself over. So just make sure you play it correctly, and then maybe find something to side in against it. Although I do think Tapion is a pretty decent answer. Although I don't know if he actually has a limit though. Let's see. Yeah, so his is 5, so maybe he's not a good answer. But that does mean maybe the 3-drop Minaka would be a good thing to sideboard against Cell Chain. Although, honestly, I don't think you'll have to worry too much about a whole lot of Cell Chain. I think the meta is just too fast for it at the moment. So then, let's go ahead and move on to the Monkey deck. So, if I was going to play this again, I would literally just cut all 3 of these and probably one of these. The problem is that with how fast the meta is, you don't want to, on your second turn, you don't want to play him, realistically. There's a good chance on your second turn you're still going to be using the Bardock to awaken, and so you really just don't want to play him. And so then on turn 4, you don't want to play him either because you want to march for 2 apes. And then turn 5, you can play this if your opponent's board state isn't getting out of control. If it is, then you need to find a way to take care of that. So again, I would probably take out all 3 of these and at least one of these and maybe find something else better for them. Maybe even something a little bit more defensive for them. I don't think this is a bad deck by any stretch. I definitely think that with a few changes, you could do really well with this deck. I just fear that Chain Attack Zeno is too easy to get off now because of the Trunks. Like, people can literally do it as early as turn 2. They could literally just play down the 1-drop Trunks on turn 2, swing with it, untap that 1 red energy with a combo Trunks, and then evolve it. So because of how easy Chain Attack Zeno is, I don't know if I would play this deck at a major event. Now, I did sideboard a couple of these, and if you are going to play this and you play against a deck that's running, you know, the Trunks, and you think they could be doing Chain Attack Zeno, playing this Mecha Frieza would be really good because you can look at their hand, you grab out a battle card, put it in rest mode. The one thing that I would say is be careful because that means they get to use whatever effect it is. So now that I say that, maybe it's not the best answer. Although I guess you could use this to force your opponent to Zeno when they don't want to. That would actually be pretty hilarious. So yeah, I also did include the 6-drop Frieza just because whenever this blocks, it stands back up. So you could literally just use this to block over and over again. And a lot of cards now, or a lot of decks now, aren't running any type of real removal. So there's a chance this blocker could stick for quite a while if you do play it. So this is something I'd consider sideboarding, and then the rest of this you can just see here. I still have this King Cold card. And I think that's probably all the changes I would have for this deck. So let's go ahead and look at the final deck here, or at least half of it. There we go. So this is a Goku GT deck. This deck is also a ton of fun. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, this deck is actually so much fun. Some of the things that we were kind of working around with, trying to play around with, were the numbers for Bulma and Senzu Bean. But basically the whole idea behind this deck is you really just use the Trunks and Cabba to either self-awaken or swing for game, one or the other. But basically you get your opponent down to 5, play the 6-drop, swing with it to get him down to 3. And then when he stands himself back up, you play the 7-drop, swing in, they can't negate it. There's nothing they can do other than having a blocker. Now, one cool thing about this deck is because of Flute, you can literally just flute most blockers back to their hand. So, because I was actually playing a deck that had Yajirobe, and so like I had a Yajirobe out on board, so I'm like, okay, I'm safe. And so my opponent literally just flutes the Yajirobe back to my hand, plays the 7-drop, swings for game, I lose. So that's definitely a good way to go. Honestly, I don't think Nimbus really screws this deck over too bad. I would think the biggest thing that screws this deck over would be Monkeys, just because you really don't want to have to play Chain Attack Zeno in this deck. Like, you can sideboard it in just in case, but you really don't want to have to. And if you can kill your opponent fast enough, then, you know, the Apes deck is fine. But if you don't get that turn 2 or 3 kill, then you could be in a lot of trouble. Like, if they start setting up a few Monkeys, you could be in a lot of trouble. Now, as for this one, it looks like the majority of it is all free combos, which is really good for the deck. Most of the time, you're going to be using this Goku for defense rather than offense, because your energy is going to be so used up whenever you're trying to play on your own turn that you really just don't want to waste any energies for this combo, so you'll save it for defense. Because basically turn 1 you want to play 1 or 2 of these depending on, you know, what you need. You could also play Trunks, Swing, and Awaken. And then turn 2 you really want to go into this guy, swing with your leader or someone else, untap this Trunks, evolve, swing with him, untap something else, evolve into this guy. So with this 7-drop, right, this dude is insanely broken. Maybe one day I'll get better at this. Sorry, you guys. Holy cow, I'm just breaking stuff. Alright. So I didn't realize just how broken this guy was until we started playing with him. So he's got Deflect, so they can't Crusher Ball him, and they can't Cold Blow Dust him. He's got Triple Strike, which, again, in this meta is really easy to get your opponent down to 3. And then whenever you play this card, you draw 2. Right? So this EX Evolve, you don't discard anything for this EX Evolve. Like, for this Goku, you have to discard 1 card from your hand. For this one, you don't discard anything. You literally just tap 1 red energy and evolve it. And then on top of that, you get to draw 2 cards. That's just insanely good hand advantage. Like, straight away, like, I mean, if you play this and the attack goes through, then you basically win if your opponent's at 3 life. Then, if the card's power is 40k or more, then they can't basically negate. They can't activate negate. So that's the thing. It's not that they can't negate the attack, it's that they can't activate counters. Which means your opponent can't Mafuba. Because I know with Victory Strike Goku, your opponent can Mafuba the Goku, and you didn't technically negate the attack, you just Mafuba the Goku, so now his attack doesn't go through because he's not there. With this, you can't even activate counter, so you can never Mafuba to begin with. So your opponent's only hope is to have a blocker on board, and again, if you have any of your flutes left, you can just flute the blocker up first. Now, as far as getting him up to the 40k, with this deck, you have multiple ways to do that. You can play the Pan down a couple of times, because you can play Pan for free. Flute her back, play her for free, just use the effect every time, because she basically grants 1 Goku or Trunks GT 5k power for the turn. So you can just play multiple Pans for free. You can also play the Bulma a couple of times, and the Bulma's going to help you draw as well. You can also swing with something else and Senzu Bean this guy. So that's one big thing too. Keep in mind, when you're attacking, you can Senzu Bean other targets, right? Senzu Bean just has to be activated during battle. So like you could swing with your leader and then throw 2 Senzu Beans on whatever Goku you're about to, you know, charge up. The other thing is, if you evolve into the 6-drop first, before you evolve into the 7-drop, after that first swing, he does gain 5,000. So like there's already 5k, and then you do literally one of the other 10 options you have, and there's 40,000, so they can't counter it. And plus you have whatever combos in your hands. Like, I mean, there's a good chance you're going to be swinging for 80 to 120,000. Triple strike with no negates possible. So these are the 5 decks that I'm considering right now for this coming weekend down in Miami. By the way, if you guys are going to be at the PPG's event, please let me know. We can definitely meet up if you want to. I'll be more than happy to hang out with you guys. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Which one of these decks is your favorite? You know, what suggestions would you have? You know, like if you're going to play one of these, what would you do to it to kind of change it, make it better, make it your own? So go ahead and let me know down in the comments what you guys thought. Maybe if there's a different deck that I missed that might be really good right now, let me know about that too. So thank you guys for watching. Have a great night.